Hello, Athon fans and authors, and everyone who's comes into these regular meetings seeing what the new, latest, greatest releases are in Athon book series. We have the whole gambit. We have a horror, we have a lit RPG, and we have military sci-fi today. And then later, after I'm done, we're going to talk to AC Hadfield, whose entire box series was released today. So, excellent deal on that one if y'all want to take a look. So, first up, we have book 3 in the Exodus Earth series, Battleship by Andrew Berry. And we have, as every week, I've got pull up a little review, 5-star review, someone who enjoyed and does a synopsis of the book real quick to give you sort of a picture of it. Military sci-fi. What a ride. Quirky, fun, with lovable characters. Although it's shown as military sci-fi, it's not too overbearing with the muscle-bound mercs shooting everything in sight. It has great pacing. Thoroughly enjoyed this first installment, especially the references to certain sci-fi shows. And just to preface that, take the first book in the series and take a review from that one so you kind of get an idea of what it is. So check out the series Exodus Earth by Andrew Berry. Next, we're going to go to Defiance of the Fall, Book 3. Lots of people were really looking forward to this one. This is a lit RPG by Jeff Brink. Book 1, which is also Defiance of the Fall, Book 1. This, by far, is one of the best lit RPG books I've read for a long while, almost on par with the Ten Realms series. Overall, the progression went from a slightly country but urban accountant into a true murder hobo, but with a nice transition that didn't feel forced with enough drama and plot to make me feel like a bunch of books I've previously read don't even deserve 5 stars in comparison. Quite the review right there. And then we have a unique book and a unique series for Athon. This one is sort of in the horror genre, fantasy, but horror. The Against the Night series. A lot of people are talking about how unique and amazing this book is for its genre. So, Broken by Carter Thompson. Read the look inside and purchased the book, if only to finish the scene, then completed the book over the next couple of nights. Mr. Thompson's story was intriguing and so different from the usual genre, which this reviewer says is military space opera. He drew me in by writing an interesting, action-packed, thrilling horror adventure with down-to-earth characters. The setting is a bit dark for my usual taste, but there are numerous spots that just stuck out as bright to me. For someone who doesn't read horror, I'm now stuck anxiously awaiting the delivery of book number 2, which is Broken. So if y'all want to take a look at the Against the Night series by Carter J. Thompson, I recommend giving it a look because it is certainly something that will change the flow of what most readers would probably be looking for, the same old, same old. So now we have AC Hadfield, Blackstar Command's box set that was released today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. How's it going?
Hi, John. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So this is the complete series for Blackstar Command that's being released today, the whole box set in one? Or was there a book 4?
No book 4 yet, but who knows? Nice thing with these space opera series is they're always so large in scope, you can never tell if it'll, spawn some more episodes. But yeah, essentially, book 3 completes this story plot. And yeah, so the third book is, instead of releasing it as a single book, we figured, let's give the readers the whole thing in one go. Because there has been a delay, from the third book and the first 2, which were out originally. Mm-hmm. And so we figured, good story to start from the beginning and then read all the way through to the end. So that's kind of why we're doing it as a box set now.
I'd made the mistake before of talking about a box set that was book 1 through 4. It's like not realizing that there was already a 5, 6, 7, and 8 coming out. Playing a little bit of catch up with some of these book series. So tell us a little bit about Blackstar Command. I read through some of the reviews, and there was quite a few compliments on the space opera feel of this one.
Yeah, it's I tried to put in a lot of things that I'm into. So obviously with sci-fi, we often talk in very kind of straight categories. This is military sci-fi, this is space opera adventure, and so on and so forth. what the goal was with this from the outset was to try and just put in everything I liked. So there's to use sort of the major IPs that we're familiar with. There's some Star Warsy stuff in there in terms of it's more space fantasy rather than hard SF. Likewise, there's also some kind of more paranoia and sort of political stuff. So again, a little bit of Battlestar, creeps in there. And then there's more wide-ranging things, a little bit of Dune, with some of the planets and some of the scheming amongst the elites. But at its heart, I'd say it's an adventure. It's primarily set around two orphans. They're on this kind of backwards planet, and they want to get off and go live on one of these paradise planets. But they've got almost no resources, no hope, and it's all set in the backdrop of a war. This quadrant has been at peace for nearly 10 years, and like a lot of these stories, everyone believes it's all hunky-dory until another enemy rocks up and upsets the apple cart. And our two orphans, their goals are kind of sort of put back, and they find themselves at the center of this war, which for them is pretty rough, but hopefully it's fun for the readers.
Fantastic. Is there basically there's sort of a world building element to it, or would this be, it's straight up exploration, hopping world to world to world?
There's like key worlds that we spend a fair bit of time on. The opening planet is probably a good half of the first book. And then we kind of go on a little bit of a tour throughout the galaxy, exploring some very mysterious places that up until now have not been available to the citizens of the Lacides quadrant. So yeah, there's definitely some world building across various planets, and there's some more galactic scope as well for those who enjoy a bit of an adventure romp.
Yeah. So what if you were to compare this to another book series, or where you drew some of your heavy inspiration from, which series would you potentially compare it to for the people that are kind of taking a look and seeing if this is going to
be that's a tough one. 'Cause like I say, I never really aim to crib one individual thing. Everything's a mishmash of ideas that I'm excited about. But I'd say I took a lot of inspiration from Ian M. Banks's culture novels. Although I would say that these are a lot more fun and adventure-y. Obviously the culture novels, they're very literary and they cover a lot of sort of deeper, complex ideas. I like to approach some of those in these books, but I also know that these are more for fun and adventure than, really high-minded literary concepts. So yeah, I'd say between the culture novels and Star Wars when it was good, I'd say that's kind of a good idea of what this is about.
Oh, good. That's when it comes to sci-fi, sometimes it seems they take themselves very seriously in the sci-fi, space opera, military. It's like you kind of do need to bring some fun back into it, some surprises, and it's like, something's going to pop out to you and make you laugh instead of make you more tense than you already were in the reader. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So I've noticed a lot of people in the comments said that your characters were extremely likable. And I think that's a very difficult technique for a lot of writers and aspiring writers, such as myself. I run into that all the time. I was like, is this character someone that the readers are actually going to enjoy reading? They sometimes become a burden in their own tropes that I've kind of wedged them into, the smart guy. So what are some tips that you might have for authors about writing a likable character?
Okay, well, I can only talk about how I approach it, and that is that I never set out to make a likable character. I think the trouble you have if you kind of go down that route, there is a danger that you could end up with kind of a wish fulfillment character with overwhelmingly positive traits. The whole Mary Sue, Gary Stew kind of situation. For me, I don't really focus on the likability, rather than I try and make them either sympathetic or empathetic. And I always use Darth Vader as an example for this. Now, we all love Darth Vader. None of us would say he's likable in that, you'd happy to go down the pub and enjoy a pint with him, but we have sympathy for him because he's a tragic character. He's also very complex and well-rounded, and he has an arc, and this is one of the big things I think for characters is you have to have somewhat of a character arc. they can't be static and be the same all throughout, because ultimately we read stories to live vicariously through these characters, and so the more complex and well-rounded and sort of the more change they have, in quotes, the more likable they become. Another example is Hannibal Lecter, one of my all-time favorite characters. I absolutely love him. Not likable in the slightest.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's going to eat your brains with some fava beans and a nice Chianti, but he's incredibly tragic and sympathetic in that way. Whereas on the opposite side, if you take someone like Emperor Palpatine, is completely one-dimensional, cartoonish, and so he doesn't have the same resonance as some of these other characters. And likewise on the good side, I know I focused on the villains there just to illustrate the point, but even with, say, like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, they're not all perfectly good all the time, so yeah, complexity and change, that's kind of, I think, for me at least, my main approach.
Thanks for using the Star Wars examples for a simpleton like me. But yeah, you do drive a good point. When I think about it, people like to see Darth Vader, even from the first movie. People liked seeing Darth Vader. He was the interesting one in the room. And then by the end, when you actually finally meet Emperor Palpatine, it's like,
Yeah, like we root for Darth Vader, and that's why that film in particular is so powerful, because we have Darth Vader's full character arc. He comes around and he essentially dispenses with the cartoon villain. Yeah, that's basically it.
You touch on something that's become a big issue, I think, for writers and book series and series of all types. When you have a long-running series, there's only so much change that can happen in a main character. And so if your character isn't changing, if you aren't seeing progression, if you aren't seeing development, they have to pull in, some romance or something like that and it's like, and they're constantly changing potential romances or something like that. It becomes a struggle to keep your character relevant and interesting to your readers. Would you agree with that?
It can be. It depends on your approach. So you got to scale the change down if you're writing a long running series, because as you said, there's only so much change you can have before it's no longer the same character. And so always, again, just try and make it realistic. Look at life and observe humanity and people around us, and take inspiration from other books and other media. I really like literary books for this, because they tend to be more character focused, those stories, and some of the character changes can be quite minor. Either like a change in their outlook. Maybe they've learned something that has changed their personality in a small way, and so you can take those kind of elements and add those to the character throughout a long running series. So it's a little bit more of a slow burn, but again, I think it makes a more complex character. Like if you look at your own life, you can see how probably you've changed over a period of, say, 5-10 years. Well, you can condense some of those changes in books, because they usually don't span that length of time in terms of reading them, at least. And yeah, so just it's too easy to say small changes, but that's basically it. Small changes per book, and keeping the core elements of the character there. This is why, talking of the terrible Star Wars films, why Luke Skywalker was such a horrible, ham-fisted tragedy, is that they basically spun him complete 180 degrees. From where he was in the original trilogy to what they did in the new trilogy. For me, at least, it doesn't work at all, because it's not believable. You can't have that level of change in that short span of time and it still be the same character.
Yeah, it was too drastic. If they had some kind of redemption, I don't know. We could talk about that for way too long, so we won't go there. We'll go to the next thing that I noticed you getting a lot of compliments for, and that was pacing. The pacing of your book got quite roaring reviews, I'd say. So tell me a little bit about the traps and the pitfalls that writers can get into when pacing the action of the series.
Okay, well, I think it kind of depends on exactly what you mean. So you got action scenes which have their pace, and then you got the pace of the book overall. I tend to outline, and I'll use beats, and I always try and use the get in, get out quick method. Like, you kind of want to start almost in the middle of a scene and then get out almost before it's finished. And that way you can eliminate some of the transitional stuff between the interesting things. I always forget which author it was now, but they always said that they just take out the stuff that sounds like writing, and that's kind of what I do. So as I'm writing, and sometimes you can kind of think out your plot as you're writing, and that's kind of the boring stuff that just clutters it up. And so either when you're drafting or when you're editing, you want to kind of go in and take that out.
I read an extremely good example of that by Jim Butcher with Dresden Files just the other day. I was like, it was almost like it was a moment that reminded me of Memento. It's just like he's just running, and it's like, why is he running? It's like right in the middle of the action, and then he has to explain backstory and stuff like that, how he came to this point. And it was almost like he created a jigsaw puzzle for himself. And he figured it out to where it's like, this is how you can just jump straight into it. And then slowly throughout the scene, you kind of explained how he gets into this situation in a comical way. I think it was masterfully done. I'm a big fan of Jim Butcher. But yeah, the fight scenes are tough. I've written a couple of them, and I'm like, I have no clue if this is interesting right now. And I want quick feedback, but my wife is not, not a fan of most of the fantasy lit RPG stuff. So
Well, I could probably give you a few tips on that. I've written, God, probably thousands of fight scenes over the years now, and mostly I find them boring. And even reading them, I find most fight scenes don't need to exist. But I do know that, in fantasy and space opera, we do need at least some, because that's part of the appeal. And so the challenge is how to make them interesting. And it's just not because we all know the hero is going to succeed, right? So you have to make it so that there's something else at stake. And so I find that if there's more stakes, there's naturally more pace because the readers are more in tension, of what's going to happen. And so that means you're putting other things at peril, because you can't always put your main character at peril, especially if it's first person perspective. Well, they survive because they're narrating the book, unless they're a ghost, and then that starts to get into weird tricks. But as for how I tend to pace it, regular kind of like person to person fights, well, just watch a boxing match or a UFC fight, and condense all the boring stuff and just get to like near the knockouts. And you notice that most fights don't last very long. Like if you're landing a punch or, a kick or whatever attack it is, you're doing heavy damage almost immediately. And so I find that in some of these fantasy books, the fights just go on too long. The characters absorb far too much damage, and that's when it gets dull. So again, I try to use the get in late, get out quick method of a fight. When it comes to like space battles, they're a lot more tricky because you usually have a lot more elements in play. Especially this was the big this was the big challenge with the Blackstar Command story, especially the big pitched battles at the end, because not only do they have to work as an action scene, but they have to basically cap up the crescendo of the story. And what I found helps is to draw it out on paper and to then kind of work through it logically, and also just imagining it as well. Sometimes I find it's easy just to grab a beer or a cup of tea and just go and sit down for 10-20 minutes and just let the movie play out in your mind, kind of let it resolve, and try and engage the subconscious, and then look at what you've got and try and rearrange it into a kind of a logical step. And there's more sort of literary techniques in terms of going from the objective to the subjective, and that can naturally help the pace. So you'll describe something objective, i.e. happening to the character, and then you describe, or not describe, but you show the character's reaction to it, hence the subjective. And as long as you kind of keep that in mind, you get this like seesaw rhythm to a scene. And you can sprinkle in a little bit of description here and there, but you want to keep everything quite sparse and quite fast. And that makes it more fun to write as well. And I think if you're enjoying writing it more, hopefully that comes across in the reading as well.
Wow. Well, if Aethon ever has a writing class, I'm going to make sure to invite you. So a fun question, getting to the other stuff. Fun question I normally ask authors is, do you like to write to music? And if so, what do you normally listen to?
Yeah, I'd say I listen to music probably 99% of the time when I'm writing. And that 1% is usually when I'm at a really difficult spot. But generally, yeah. So with well, let me go back. I tend to listen to kind of lo-fi or synthwave for slower moments, like character moments or descriptions and exposition and that kind of stuff. When it comes to action, or depending on the genre I'm writing, then it's usually thrash metal or old school metal. So basically Black Sabbath, Metallica, Megadeth, and Mastodon. Say Blackstar
There you
Command.
go.
Yeah,
There
it
you
was, the whole series was almost written entirely to just Megadeth and Metallica.
go. I like it. That's fun. That's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to check out the lo-fi synthwave stuff more. I normally will listen to, basically I'll just pick like Interstellar soundtrack or different.
Oh, that's a great soundtrack. Yeah.
Interstellar is, I'd say it's one of the top 2-3 soundtracks of all time, in my opinion. Just the uniqueness, originality of getting organs popular again. It's like all of a sudden people like organs again. So
is that the Hans Zimmer
yeah.
production? Yeah, anything with Zimmer is great. The other guy I absolutely love, and it kind of mixes into the synthwave, and that's John Carpenter. You know, he's got a whole bunch of albums called The Lost Themes. I think there's 3 of them now, and because that's what he does now. He's like a rock star. He doesn't performs gigs. He doesn't even make films anymore. And so yeah, the John Carpenter themes are great. You know, things from like Halloween, The Fog, and The Thing are amazing.
Okay, yeah, I think I remember that. So last thing, what's next? I mean, you've finished this series 4 now. Potentially coming back to it. I think you potentially hinted at that. But what's next? What can your readers look forward to?
Well, hopefully, unlike me, it won't be long before there's some new work out. You know, usually I'll take a long time between things. But I've just finished, well, I'm currently finishing up the 3rd book in a new urban fantasy gamelit series called Steve the Paladin. And that's with Aethon. Tantor have bought the audio rights, so that's nice and exciting. We don't have a release date yet. Presumably it's going to be in the new year now. But yeah, there's 3 of those all ready to go, pretty much. And yeah, so that should keep us all busy for a little while. And who knows, after that, it could be a return to space opera. If the Steve the Paladin stuff does really well, maybe it'd be more episodes in that. I do have a really cool idea for a post-apocalyptic space vampire horror epic, so might dive into that. Yeah, but we'll see in the new year, I suppose.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on and giving me all your amazing advice, and looking forward to Steve the Paladin and seeing some artwork come out for that. I always get to see the artwork before everyone else, so it's always fun. And if y'all are tuning in, y'all need to take a look at Blackstar Command, because you can get the whole box set right now, all in one go for a very reasonable price. I think it's also Kindle Unlimited. So we have a lot of Kindle Unlimited readers out there. So this is a good set to take a look at and get introduced to AC Hadfield before we get Steve the Paladin. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Maybe when Steve the Paladin is scheduled to go.
It'll be great to be back on and talk with you, John. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Talk to you all next week.